Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. Today's tiny drop of wisdom for the sacred pause is a little bit different. I'm sat out here in the countryside in France. I've just dropped off my kids at school, which still feels a little bit strange because we're in the sacred pause during the tail end of the first wave of COVID-19. And I do this beautiful walk home every day. I see sheep, I see cows, and today it is one of those stunning days. There's a little spring breeze, and it's almost like the trees are talking to me. The wind has got a message. And I walk past this bench, which is in the middle of nowhere, and it looks out over Mont Blanc and the Swiss Alps. It must be the most peaceful place I've ever been to. Whenever we do meditations, this is one of the places I think of when they say you go to a sacred place. And it reminds me that nature is an incredible healer. So much beauty, so much stillness, and yet just enough noise to bring some magic. And I always see something I've never seen before, whether it's a flower or maybe it's a bird singing in the trees. And you can hear them now in the background, I'm sure. Anyway, today's drop of wisdom, I wanted to talk about a big moment in my life. I went to Bali last year. So for those listening in the future, that was 2019. And a friend of mine had been sick for a long time. He was one of my best friends in the world. Someone who you could talk to about anything. He even looked a little bit like me, much taller. He was a giant in every respect. And there I was, lying on a beach in Bali, in paradise. And I received a message from his wife. Because this person, my friend, had been sick. He'd been fighting cancer. And the last message I got from him, I'd sent him a message saying, Klaus, I feel like I need to come and see you. And he sent me a message saying, I want you to see me when I'm better. I want you to see me when I'm strong. And I understood that and I respected that. I think maybe I knocked on the door 3 times, and 3 times he politely declined in a very beautiful way. So there I am, sat on the beach in Bali, and I get this message from his wife. Dear Pete, this is the worst message ever to formulate. On Monday afternoon, my beloved husband, Klaus, passed away and travelled to the stars. So think of him next time you see the brightest star at the sky. He was the best and strongest man ever. His last weeks were spent in his parents' summer house at the west coast of Denmark, where he wanted to be near the ocean, where we have been swimming. Walking along the beach in all types of weather. We had some funny and cosy moments. The funeral will be on Saturday in Copenhagen. Well, you could probably hear the emotion in my voice. I mean, it must be the hardest message you receive in the world, when you get a message saying one of your best friends has died. It certainly was for me. Yeah. I didn't know what to do. I was on a beach in Bali with my family, and yet this paradise that I was in suddenly kind of dissolved and became unimportant. Suddenly I was in conversations that I didn't want to be in because it didn't seem to matter, because I'd been shown a new perspective on everything. I've been shown that even though I'm relatively young, that we can die at a young age. I'd been shown that one of the strongest, fastest, most athletic, health-conscious people that I knew, who in my eyes probably led the most similar life to the one that I could lead, had been taken. So I decided that I would jump on an aeroplane, because there was nowhere I wanted to be more than at his funeral. And as a man who was scared to death as a child, who hated churches, who hated church bells and graveyards and anything connected with dying, it was quite an amazing thing. But over that last 5 years, I'd really dealt with death, my own death, the potential death of all my family, the people I loved. Probably not the death of my children. I think that would have been, well, that still is something that I haven't got my head around. But I jumped on a plane anyway, and I went back to Klaus's funeral. And the irony is that the next few messages which went between myself and his wife were about the fact that I only had shorts and t-shirt on my holiday in Bali, and I didn't really want to walk into his funeral wearing Hawaiian shirt and bright shorts and flip-flops, because that's all I take on holiday, because there's not much room in a suitcase when you have 2 daughters and a wife who likes to dress up. And yet, then I thought, well, hold on. This funeral is for Klaus, the man I spent a year travelling around the world with, on a beach. The guy I didn't know from Adam. I'd met him on a coach, and we just started talking and just connected straight away, so like-minded. And all he ever did was wear flip-flops and shorts and t-shirt. And it turned out that his dying words were to be put in the tomb, in the coffin, wearing his beach clothes. It took me 2 days to get back to Copenhagen, and everyone I spoke to at all the airports, because I had to change at 3 different airports, I think, everyone seemed to know and understand. I said, one of my best friends has died, I need to get to his funeral, and it was quite tight in terms of making it back. But you know that feeling when you just know that there's extra help? Well, I had that. Klaus was on my shoulder. He was whispering in the ears of every flight attendant, of every flight changer, and I literally arrived in Copenhagen 2 hours before the funeral, jumped in a taxi, and arrived with 10 minutes to spare. I did manage to buy something a little bit more respectable at the airport, but actually I quite enjoyed walking in my beachy wear, and I could almost sense my friend smiling. What has happened over... the funeral was beautiful, let me say, but Klaus has 3 young children, and I stayed with his wife, and I hung out with the kids who don't speak much English, and my Danish isn't great, but we communicate on another level. And what I loved about the funeral was the way that the children were hugging the coffin, and there was no barrier put between them and his death. He'd spent the last 6 weeks in this summer house with them, explaining to them what it was all about. And he even booked his own flight, I think, for his body over, because he lived on, their summer house is on an island in Denmark, and he'd even organised the flight for his own coffin to be flown over to Copenhagen. I think he'd booked the restaurant, the place where we were eating after the funeral, and he'd chosen the songs, and he'd written a speech for his own funeral. Isn't that incredible? Can you imagine doing that? There's a little baby just going past now. Bonjour. And it made me think, like, what strength and courage that takes to do that. But the big bit of the story is that over the coming days and weeks, Klaus started talking to me. He needed to communicate with his family, because although he'd organised so much, all the little details, the restaurant, the flight, he saw from the other side that his wife was struggling. He saw that one of the kids was getting angry. And although I only spent a few days over in Copenhagen, he was telling me exactly what advice I needed to give his wife and the children. He has a little boy called Eric, and Eric was getting angry. Obviously Eric was only 6, so he didn't understand. So I would get this message from Klaus saying, can you tell Ellen, which is his wife, can you tell her that when Eric gets angry, it's okay? He needs to be angry. It's his way of dealing with death. He doesn't understand. He hasn't got the emotional intelligence. He hasn't developed these facets yet. I didn't really know how his wife would receive these messages, but obviously I was just typing. I typed them in my phone, and I just sent them. And I said, Klaus says, let Eric be angry. And Klaus also says that when Eric's angry, don't shout at him, but just use that opportunity to open your emotions yourself, because you're holding back. Again, I wasn't with her, so I didn't know she was holding back. I didn't even know Eric was getting angry, but straight away she would reply saying, how do you know? And this continued. Every time she felt low, Klaus would tap me on the shoulder and just send me these messages. And I would literally just type into my phone the message which was coming through me from Klaus. I couldn't see him, I just felt this message. And every time I did, she replied saying, how do you know? Like, this is amazing. It's like Klaus is talking to you. Well, he was. And this continues now, even today. And during COVID-19, during this break, it's been a really tough time. You know, she's a young mother with 3 children, no father to look after the children, and very little support in the area. A beautiful, beautiful family, but the incredible message and lesson that we've been taught is that Klaus is not gone at all. And although I have still got great sadness in the fact that I can't physically go and see him, that I never physically got to say goodbye, he's told me it's all irrelevant. he says he's in a great space, and he's told me that this was all arranged before he was even born, that he would live for 39 years. And he told me to say to his wife that, look at my life, every day you had with me was a gift, the gift of Klaus. And every day you haven't got me, you look back on the gift of me being there. Totally flipping everything round. And so I asked him, Klaus, why did we meet? And he said, we actually met because I spent a year travelling around the world together, around Australia and New Zealand and Tasmania. And he said, we actually met because I was meant to be there to send these messages to his wife after he died. Now, we had some amazing fun together, me and Klaus. He taught me a lot about life, about stillness, patience, being calm in every single situation, about loyalty. So I'm sure he also came to teach me that. But actually, he said, we met because his wife needed me to pass on the messages once he died. And as I sit on this bench in France, every time I come past this bench on the way back from school, Klaus is sat here. He loves Mont Blanc, and it was always his connection. He loved skiing in his human life, and it was always his connection with the earth. And so he chooses to sit on this bench. And every time I sit on it, it's like he's sat next to me. And maybe I'm even sat on his knee. Sorry, Klaus. But there's a great message here, in that anyone that you've lost in your life, they're walking beside you in every single moment. The love you have for them does not die when their physical body moves on. The love stays there, in your heart, in your soul. It runs far deeper than just a physical body you can touch. And yes, they can't look after you anymore in the way that we know as humans. They can't touch you in the same way. But if you can remember that they're there in your heart, and if you can accept and understand that there's probably 99% of the things around us we cannot see, that they walk beside us in every moment, that they watch over us with an intelligence far beyond what our human brains tell us we have. If we can drop the science and embrace the soul, it's a whole different world. So, to the people that you've lost, and to Klaus, so just remember, next time you feel sad because someone isn't here, that they are here, and that they do love you, and that they never forget, and that they live deep in your heart. Aho. So let's have a minute's silence in honour of all the people who we've lost in our lifetime, and perhaps in honour of someone special who you've been thinking of during this talk.